Hello, everyone. What a great crowd we've got here today. And we're going to tackle a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. My name's Anne Gaviola. I'm with Global News. I'm a national anchor, host, and reporter based out of Toronto, Canada. I've been covering business for 15 plus years, but back in 2018, I worked in the private sector in fintech at what was at the time one of the leading blockchain companies in Canada. So what we're going to get into here, and I want everyone to appreciate who I have on stage with me. It's going to be an interesting discussion. We're going to be talking about the future of fintech. And I know, it's a massive topic, so where do we begin? I want to talk about a hot take that one of these panelists has. Jana, you believe that fintech as we know it is under threat. It's kind of a perfect storm in some ways. Please elaborate. Let's get into it.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and very good afternoon to everyone. Yes, I appreciate that may be a controversial statement to open the panel with, but I genuinely believe that fintech is under threat right now. And the reason for that is because fintechs are, in a certain way, facing the perfect storm right now. On the one hand, we have all of the big tech companies with significant resources, with unparalleled access to data that are getting into the space, getting into banking, into payments, into lending, and basically becoming the next fintech. So that's one significant threat. Then on the other hand, you also have traditional banks, which historically have been very boring, but we need to recognize that in the current environment, in the current interest rate environment, they have a license to print money, and therefore the ability to purchase anyone that innovates and that tries to create and foster competition. So that's another big threat. And the third one, I'd say last but not least, is the erosion of trust. In the last 2-3 years, we've seen a number of payment providers, very famous fintechs, basically fall victim to their own doing. And I think that the erosion of trust is really creating an issue for the wider ecosystem. And this is why I think that the future is under threat, and we all have to work together to figure a way forward.
And those are really great points.
Happy to be challenged on that.
Absolutely, those are great points. That third one, we'll put that aside for a moment. But those first two, you're talking about incumbents in, legacy financial and tech getting into the space. That to me sounds like the path to mass adoption and kind of the next wave. But your thoughts? Is fintech as we know it under threat for those reasons?
I think I'm more of an optimist. It's funny because when we first started GoCardless in 2011. Fintech wasn't even a term that people were using, right? We didn't think of ourselves as starting a fintech company. And when I speak to many of the founders that started fintech companies in the same sort of era, none of us were thinking about starting fintech companies. And so I think the reality is that it's a bit more fragmented, right? And when we were first starting out, we were very much focused on, okay, there's a problem that we see, and we're trying to solve that problem. And there's lots of great businesses that I think continue to do really well in this market and continue to have a really bright future. And I think what's going to really determine it is going to be how great a product have you built, how big a problem are you solving, have you been able to do it in a way that's actually sustainable, with good unit economics, with customers that keep on working with you over the long haul. And then if you can do those things, then I think there's plenty of opportunity. So I think you're right that there's definitely going to be segments of what we call fintech now that will face a threat and that will struggle. But I don't think it's going to be universal. And I think there's plenty of opportunity still out there.
Samir, what does your crystal ball tell you?
Yeah, no, but I think it's a positive sign. I actually agree with the description of what's happening. Competition is usually good, not only for the end customer, but also think in order to sort out which are who are the winners. In our case, how we look at fintech, it's obviously very early days still. Fintech stands for maybe 2-3% of total financial services. That we see now, both technology companies, legacy banks investing more. I think that is a clear signal that there's a huge opportunity. And I also think it's because they feel under threat. What I see when I look at next year is that for the first time we have fintech companies that when in the early days when they started out, they had superior technology, but they didn't have the foundation of different user journeys or functions that they really could compete with incumbents. Now, today, we see a group of companies coming out there and really being true threats against these incumbents. And therefore, obviously, they need to act on that. And hopefully the best company will win. And I obviously hope that we will win. I hope you two win too. But if we lose, that's a good thing for the consumer or the customer.
Yeah, can everyone win? So this is interesting. We're several minutes in. We haven't brought up the topic of AI yet, but I think it is time. When we talk about the kind of the context for all of this, the future of fintech, we're at a time where, certainly in terms of the mainstream understanding and awareness, everyone is thinking about, aware now of AI. What does that mean for the future of fintech specifically, as you see it?
I mean, from my perspective, very quickly, hopefully that will enable more innovation. And the reason why I'm saying this is because ultimately the regulated financial services require a significant resource when it comes to transaction monitoring and KYC and generally that compliance and conduct framework around providing the regulated service. So the way that we think about it is this is the first area in which we apply AI in order to drive it forward and really focus the resources that we have and the expertise that we have to innovate. So that's our angle.
Yeah, I agree with that in terms of in the short term, I think the bigger impacts are going to be felt more internally by the fintechs in the space, and not just fintech companies, like all sorts of companies, and in particular, optimizing some of those processes around like compliance, regulatory requirements, etc., like a lot of risk management, and much of this has already been happening, right? If you look at AI in a broader sense, not just generative AI, things like machine learning to improve, success rates, reduce fraud, all of this kind of stuff. Like, payment companies, fintech companies have been using that for many, many years. But I think that what's interesting about the latest version of or the latest wave of AI is that you're able to apply that to a broader set of circumstances. And I think initially that will be internal. What I still don't think I see, or I'm not sure what it's going to look like, is how does generative AI affect the checkout experience and the way people make payments. I think that's something that is still up in the air, and I think will be really exciting.
Yeah, no. So from our perspective, when it comes to internal piece, I actually think it's also a solution for the third problem when it comes to trust. One of the reasons AI will, in my view, have a very strong impact on fintechs is because it's very expensive to onboard new customers with fintechs. It is very costly to have customers as a fintech because you live in a regulated environment. And a big reason some companies has taken these shortcuts and maybe not handled the customers in a fair and good way is because of that cost. And if we can, through AI, reduce the cost of having customers at fintechs, I believe trust will go up, compliance will be stronger. And that's just one piece that's very important. And then obviously you have all other internal processes when it comes to everything from creating better engineering output to otherwise. And hopefully what it will mean with stronger AI capabilities internally is that fintechs will be able to compete better against the incumbent banks, against technology companies that doesn't have the same passion, the same talent that we have for our use cases. And then lastly, when it comes to external, obviously coming down to how it affects the customer side, I think we are a vertical bank. We focus on integrating functions that typically been outside of banking. And with AI, we can truly do that in a new way. We look at everything from benchmarking insights, costs, every different, what we call finance, process, treasury, accounting, card and controls. All of that is done manually today and can be done much better of a computer.
Well, one of the trends that I'm hearing over and over again in these talks already, and it's just very early days for this conference, is that, yes, AI is very visible right now. It's got a lot of hype around it. But in a couple of years, it'll just be kind of embedded. It'll be table stakes when it comes to what customers want, whether it's consumer-facing or enterprise. It'll just be seamlessly part of the process in a way that it sort of is now, but people are giving it a lot more thought. Is that your view, that it's going to just kind of be integrated, be embedded in some ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think it's just the next phase of development of what we now call embedded finance. Because if you think about embedded finance, this was really the promise to liberalize financial services, a sector which is otherwise very complex from the outside, which is highly regulated, as Samir mentioned. So going back to the AI topic, it is just a tool to help us advance and bring this forward.
When you talk about unless you want to jump in, but I want to talk about the highly regulated piece. Go ahead.
Yeah, just but before then, I think it's so interesting. Like we have these reports looking at the data of our customers, and we talk about AI. We could talk about applied statistics. Q2, our customer 8% had an AI application. Now Q3, 24%. So you already see this embeddedment happening, and more companies applying AI in different use cases. So it's a revolution underway.
A revolution underway. Is there a danger, though, that there are companies that, especially in the fintech space, when it comes to that, the customer journey, the checkout process, making it seamless, that they choose the AI solution and lose sight of what it is that we're trying to do because it's fashionable? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think everything has to be wedded to improving the experience, right, and making it something better for your customers, and whether that's reducing the cost of the compliance or making the compliance process an easier one to go through, or anything to do with that. It has to be grounded in an improved experience for the customer. And so I think there may be wasted effort that goes into trying lots of things, and some of it will work, some of it won't. But I think the things that will stick will certainly be the ones that actually have a good impact.
I think ultimately AI cannot take the fundamentals out. And when I talk about fundamentals, especially in a regulated environment, you have the technological infrastructure, and then you have the regulatory coverage. So yes, we can have a conversation about how to improve the processes, how to become faster at onboarding, at transaction monitoring, but the fundamentals need to be in place. And this is where, again, I think having that infrastructure and having the right infrastructure and selecting the right partner is incredibly important. And if I may come back to Samir's point about the increased usage of AI, that percentage, the statistics that you were mentioning, I think this is just another validation of the fact that people are now focusing on going to market in an efficient way. People are focusing again on the business fundamentals, which is something that I believe we were lacking over the last couple of years.
I want to talk about hyper-focused fintech. Samir, that is very much what your company does, and it feels like it's having a moment. Is AI going to be helping with that as well? People and companies laser-focused on something very specific with a niche customer?
Yeah, but I think if you look at financial services in general, my belief, and coming from e-commerce, I think it's obvious that building a bank that is only focused on one user group, in our case e-commerce, has a lot of advantages. We can customize the experience, the tool set, for this group and how they behave. And you do that on two sides. One is on the solution side, and the second is the specific problems that e-commerce have that no one else have. And when we apply AI, I believe we can do that in a more secure way, because we can focus on our customer group, sharing the data, giving the AI or learn the AI through the data from one group in one environment. And I think that's something very helpful. So I hope we have our moment right now. We see that in our numbers. I believe in the next year and the years ahead, we'll see a lot of what we can call vertical fintechs coming out of the startups. Maybe that's here today.
Well, I think also that's a big driver behind the whole embedded finance sort of movement, I guess. What we definitely found from very early on was that there's a lot of fragmentation in terms of, as you said, like different users have different needs, and being able to build experiences that work really well across those fragmented use cases is very hard. And so that's where embedded finance becomes quite interesting, because you can, we've taken a very different approach. We've focused very much on a specific type of payment method, and then we help other businesses to embed that into their services, right? And so we never get into that kind of software layer, and instead we enable others to do that. And I think that you can see both approaches working, right? Ones where they're very vertically specific and very focused on a specific use case, and then more platform type approaches, which are also need to be focused in their own way, but then get embedded through different types of platforms. And I definitely believe a lot in the focus point there.
I could go on, but I'm mindful of time, and I always like to leave the audience with something to think about, something to chew on beyond when this discussion is done. So I would ask each of you, and mindful that there are founders in the fintech space and possibly people who are thinking of making that leap, who maybe in a few years will be there. It's a tough time for fintech. It feels like we say that a lot, though, so maybe that's just how it goes. It's a turbulent time generally in terms of geopolitical considerations, economic considerations. Is it a downturn? Is it a recession? What's coming? It's never been tougher to kind of predict. So what would your words of advice be for someone who is brave enough to get into this wild space and would like to make a go of it, even when it's tough?
No, I think now is a great time to be starting businesses. Probably the risk is higher. The chances of actually making it through the first, 1, 2, 3 years of the journey might be lower. But I think some of the strongest businesses will be formed in this period. And I think we all have received a good reminder of the need to have some of the fundamentals right, which maybe we lost sight of over the 2020, 2021 type of period. But now it's very clear, very front and center, and I think that will create the right kind of foundations for really successful businesses. So, I think it's as good a time as any.
Yeah, I think history shows some of the best businesses are built during turbulent times. Words of advice.
Yeah, but I think I agree fully with your take here, and it's much harder to build a company. It takes much longer and in each of my companies I've been part of, I always felt that, or I thought that it would be easier than it actually was. So you need to be extremely passionate. You need to don't take any shortcuts. And we created Juni in March 2020, 1 month after Corona, and we thought obviously, it was a very turbulent time back then too, but fuck it, if you're passionate about something, if you want to do it, you're going to do it. And so now I think it's the right time.
I'd say don't focus on the things that are outside of your control, because you said it. It's a very difficult time from a macroeconomic perspective, but the reality is that for those founders that sit here in the room with us, most of those things are outside of their control, outside of our control. So I would say focus on the things that are within your control, focus on the fundamentals of your business, focus on the needs of your customers, and take it one step at a time, 1 month at a time, and build those small wins. And then when you look back 12 months, you'll see those incremental gains month on month would have actually allowed you to make that leap forward. So yeah, just do not worry too much. Focus on the fundamentals, and the right outcome will come.
And maybe some deep partnerships. Final words. I like to leave it on a bit of a high note. So it's not for the faint of heart getting into this space, but I promise you, it is never boring. It is so interesting. You can fill your cup. Would you say it's worth it?
Absolutely. And again, if I may, I'd say it's going to be challenging. So make sure that you build that business with a good team around you, people that you share the same values with, because the days are going to be difficult, but in the end, if you share the same values, if you all walk in the same direction, that's the most rewarding part of the journey.
Yeah. I think building something for an unsolved problem, there is no greater reward than having that feeling and seeing customers being happy for what you have strived for, what you have put your efforts into. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, there's no satisfaction quite like it, right?
Yeah.
Fully agree with what these guys said. Yeah.
That feels like the perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. You can find us on social media to continue the conversation. Thank you, guys. Thank you.